Sleep apnea is way more than just a anatomical or mechanical issue. You see, there are a lot of metabolic drivers of sleep apnea. And in fact, if sleep apnea was only your anatomy or only the mechanics of your airway, then why the heck is it so much more common as you get much older? The reason for this is because of metabolic breakdowns that then lead to dysfunctional breathing and dysfunctional muscles in your airway, and also smaller airways. Because if you have inflammation build up over time, that is going to narrow your airway and make it harder to breathe. The truth is, sleep apnea is a sign of a total system failure throughout your entire body, all the way down to how your cells are functioning. And that's why nutrition is such a huge part of overcoming sleep apnea once and for all. And inflammation is one of the biggest factors that will be driven by the foods you choose to consume. So that's why in this episode, we're going to cover the top foods to avoid for sleep apnea. And this will not be some BuzzFeed type of article where I just list out 10 things that you could just read in 5 seconds. Instead, I'm going to show you how to start looking at the foods that you're eating so you know which is the worst for you. Because a list of 20 is not going to serve you. What's going to be more important is if you identify the top 3, 4, or 5 foods that are hurting you, your breathing, and your sleep. So let's go ahead and dive in as we're going to go over what the internet says, what the research says, what my experience says, and how you can know for yourself and your body what foods are doing you wrong. So let's go ahead and dive into what the good old internet says. The one thing I always do, I always search Google for what people think or are being told by the algorithm. And here is the number one article, which blows my mind because this is the worst formatting, really good contrast on here. But nonetheless, you'll see sugar, starches, alcohol, high fat meats, bananas. But then you will literally see contradictory statements. Bananas. Last time I checked, a banana is a fruit. And there's a lot of similarities between bananas and kiwis and many other things that contain a lot of the same issues that will lead to mucus production. And then we'll have high fat meats on this list. But then looky down here, we have a study that will show that a keto diet, which is high fat, can help with sleep apnea. And then some more contradictory because sugars, guess what? What's in fruit? Okay, sugar. And then we have starches. Well, what the heck are whole grains? They're starches. So, like, there's this whole contradictory level of information. Also, if we're talking about dairy, that's usually one of the top ones that people are told to avoid. So, when I'm looking at a lot of what people are looking up, this is how I feel. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because you get so much contradictory advice out there. So, never go for the blanket of information that you'll see in a nicely written article, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Some of it may be true, some of it may be garbage, but here's the thing. You need to know what works for you and your individual needs. It's a good starting point to have an idea, but you don't get it from poorly text formatted articles. You want to be able to look at the research instead. So this is the most boring part. We're going to get through this. It's going to be painless. These are some of the top studies more recently about looking at the interplay between diet and sleep apnea. So some of the things, once again, we see a diet high in fat here. Now, one of the biggest confounders is that you can have a high fat diet and it can be quality fat, like you may have in a keto diet, or it may be really poor quality fat, like you may see if you're having fried food. So keep that in mind. Not all fats are made equal. I want to make that very, very clear. The other thing is that processed meats, this coincides with what I said earlier, it's the quality of food that is so, so important. So processed meats, which would be like hot dogs and kind of gross stuff like that, that's what that falls into. A steak, a piece of fish, is not processed meat. Okay, so don't make the mistake that meat is bad. Another one from the research was that 2 servings of dairy was associated with way worse sleep apnea. Okay, so we're starting to build a case where bad fat quality and also dairy can be a problem. Bad fat quality is what fried food indicates because when you fry food, it completely destroys the quality of the fats that you're eating. And then this interesting quote where they wrote animal innards. I'm not exactly sure what they were referring to in this, but nonetheless, here we go again. Fried food and of course, high sugar things. So the reason that these are going to be very disruptive to metabolism is that these foods and things will hurt your cells. It will also hurt your insulin sensitivity, and both of those will make your cells metabolically worse. So keep that in mind. Now, at the same time, this is not exactly what I see as the number one contributors towards sleep apnea. So what I see a lot in myself and also our clients, these three main culprits. Number one is this fancy molecule. It's in coffee, it's in tea. You know what it is, caffeine. The reason for this is that caffeine, as it hits your throat, it will actually lead to vasoconstriction to an extent, which will make it harder for fluids and mucus to flow. And the muscles get tighter, then they get worn out over time, so they actually become weaker. And then the other reason is that caffeine will rev up your sympathetic nervous system, and then you're breathing faster, which is part of the problem at night, because a faster inhale will pull back the tongue, the soft palate, and the back of the airway, pull that all together to close off your airway. That's not good. So that's why caffeine is something I really don't like for my clients with sleep apnea. Another one is gluten containing grains, because this will cause a good bit of inflammation, once again, in the airway to make things harder. And then last on my list is milk specifically. Not all dairy. I would say milk is the worst, yogurt, maybe cheese, not so much. And I think part of this is because the more liquidy something is, then it will start to interact more with the tissues in your throat and make it more difficult to reduce inflammation in that sense. So those are my top three that I'll usually see. But here's the thing. Milk for you may do nothing. Removing gluten may do nothing for you. I don't know. These are just general broad brushstrokes. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach, nor will it ever be. So we are going to talk about how you can find your trigger foods, because we want to start with the n equals 10,000, and that means how many people in a sample of a study. N equals 10,000 would just be a lot of them, to your n equals 1. That's going to get you towards your goals at the fastest rate. And when you do this, I need to encourage you, one variable at a time. One variable. That means you're going to track, say, milk, and see how that goes for a couple of days. Do not try to change everything and do this big elimination diet. We'll have a separate video on that in the future. If you are trying to figure out which foods are the worst for you, you need to be able to track it. Okay? You do it one variable at a time. Because if you remember from good old math class, this was easy street. One variable equations. X is 2. Pretty straightforward. We add another variable. Well, there is a lot going on here. So it's going to complicate things further. That's just one more variable. 3 more variables, it becomes exponentially more difficult to know what you're doing. Because if you don't have full certainty on eliminating or adding in a food did anything for you, then you're just going in circles. It's not good. It's not what you want. So that's why it's important to subscribe to my channel. I put that there to remind myself, but also remind you, because we talk about a lot of great things. As you've been able to tell, this is the nutrition series. So if you don't want to miss that, you want to make sure you get as many insights about nutrition and sleep apnea, make sure you hit subscribe to not miss a single episode and any and all other topics we're talking about. Now, a food diary. You can use this, you can print this out, you can just write down what you're eating every single day, and what you want to track are the foods. And as you're writing this in here, I won't subject you to my awful handwriting, but imagine you're writing things in and you want to keep an eye on the suspects. And then that's the variable you would want to change. So let's say you're suspecting milk. Well, what you want to track are 3 days where you're eating milk, and then another 3 days without it. And that's the only big difference. You don't need to eat the exact same foods, but don't do something crazy different between the days. Crazy different would be on Monday, you eat salads and everything else, and then on Tuesday, you eat nothing but garlic bread from Domino's Pizza. Yes, you may have changed milk between those days, but you had a crazy other variable that would completely cloud up what you're doing and make things infinitely more complex with your 2 variable equation. So try to eat somewhat similar and just try to make sure you only change one variable at a time. So let's say you do milk, you do 3 days on, 3 days off, and then you decide, Well, what did that do for you? I know this says hunger level, but you would want to assign this to a different symptom, such as snoring, such as your sleep quality, such as your brain fog. You want to find an outcome variable, okay? Just like x equals 2, right? It's a clear relationship. So it's like milk equals snoring is what you want to establish. No milk equals less snoring. And that's how you want to go about it, 3 on, 3 off, and you just go through things and you're able to ascertain what's going to be a good decision for you. Because going without milk, if you don't have to do that, some people would rather do that. Going without gluten, same thing. Cutting out bananas. Because let's say I just made fun of bananas here. I know I did. But let's say you honestly find that bananas were a factor for you. Great. Not everybody may feel that way. Alcohol, I mean, across the board, alcohol is not going to be great if you have sleep apnea, but if you want to see the extent of it, that's what you can do. And then over time, you will find there are 3, 5, even 7 foods that you need to avoid, and it won't be the same as the foods I had to cut out. It won't be the same as the foods that we're telling our clients, hey, these aren't good for you. And that's how you achieve that, by being very diligent and meticulous. There is never going to be a golden set of these 10 foods. It just won't be. I'm sorry. I wish this could just be microwave TikTok health advice and these 10 foods will fix your sleep apnea and do your taxes and raise your kids for you and all that. It's just never going to be that way. But this is the closest you can get and gain that empowerment in your own health. So make the decision. If you're watching this, don't just sit around and be like, oh, I'm going to go to the next thing and just cut out these 10 foods. No, do it one by one. Because if you know now that dairy is no good, you have certainty in that now for the rest of your life. And then that is really where the payoff is, instead of throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and not really getting anywhere and cutting out foods that you don't need to. So it's a little bit harder, but nothing that was worth it was easy. So now with that methodology to know which foods you should avoid, now I want to get into a series of different diets that can actually help reverse your sleep apnea. And one of them gets a lot of attention. It's been really trendy, and that is the carnivore diet. And I want to show you what the success rate of that is, how you can do that, and of course, doing that without alienating yourself from society by just being someone who eats steaks for every single meal. All right. So if that is there, go ahead and click the video on the screen. If it's not, make sure you click subscribe so you don't miss out. And if you're super overwhelmed by all this information and just want us to streamline and figure out everything for you and being able to get you to a level where not just your nutrition, but all the other factors for your health, your breathing, your sleep, and everything, you can go ahead and get your free evaluation session, ochnow.com/talk. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you or talk to you soon.